Hello, dear audience. Today we have a very special guest with us, and I will be introducing her, Kyriaki Karidoyanis Fitzgerald. She's a Master of Divinity and a PhD in Psychology and Theological Studies. Dr. Fitzgerald serves as an Orthodox theologian. She is an author and licensed psychologist. She is a professor at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology. And we have the opportunity today to have her with us to discuss some important topics that are relating to the human life, to the society. And Dr. Fitzgerald has published several books. She has served in many countries. She has been appointed by the Ecumenical Patriarchate to participate in many ecumenical councils around the world to introduce the Orthodox Church. And recently she has been appointed to participate in an Orthodox Christian Jewish theological conversation in Jerusalem, Israel. So as I said, we have a very special guest, and all this, as we were talking earlier, are separate topics that can enlighten our audience about what is going on in the church and how is the church participating in the daily life. But today's topic will be on image and likeness of God in human beings. Dr. Kyriaki had special interest in introducing this topic because, as she says, this is very important for our daily life and for our service to God. Please, would you introduce with a couple words what do you mean by the image and likeness of God?
Thank you, Arkady. Thank you for inviting me to be here with you today. And thank you, everyone who happen to be tuning in right now. You're getting right to the topic. I was thinking we would get to the meaning of image and likeness toward the end and start with why I think it's important for us to talk about that. But why don't we? We can start this way. Image and likeness is a phrase that comes to us from the book of Genesis, from Genesis 1:26, when God is creating the human person. It is said that God creates the human person, Adam and Eve, in his image and after his likeness. And so that expression, image and likeness, refers to something very deep in the fabric of our being, of what it means to be human. When you asked me to be with you today, I was very anxious about what to speak about, but because only one topic kept coming to me, and it was this, image and likeness, over and over again. And I think it came up because with the work I do with people in my office, with my friends, with the people who are the people whom I teach, and the many contacts I've made in a course of a lifetime, I realize that we all act out of a frame of reference of who we are. And from that depth of who we are, we engage our own selves, we engage each other, we engage God, we engage creation. And so if that sense of who we are is incomplete and faulty, which I think for all human beings it's always going to be until God completes it, but if it's way off target, then it's going to have a massive impact in how we deal with each other, our own selves, our relationship with God and with creation. And so I think getting back to basics, what does it mean to be created in the image and likeness of God, if that is something that's been knitted into the fabric of our being. So there are many gifts, so to speak, to be created in the image of God. Historically, Christianity, especially Eastern Christianity, has tended to follow a Semitic line in understanding what image and likeness means. Image refers to the package, so to speak, of what it means to be human that God has put in each of us. And likeness, or after the likeness, refers more to the potential to which we are all called to grow, which is to become the fullest we are called to be in that image and likeness as we become that unique person we have been created to be in the presence and in the in the love of God. And so likeness is more potential. We can be filled with God, we can be in God. And image is that whole package of that whole package of the gifts that God has given us and what it means to be human, especially the ability to love, for example. That's part of the image. Another part of that package, so to speak, is the humanity's consciousness and intellect. These are often considered part of our being created in the image, especially the gift of creativity. To be creative is, in fact, a co-creator with God is part of that original package of the gift of being in the image of God. But I think the most important, because sometimes accidents happen and life happens and people are not able to take advantage of every possible gift that's potentially available to us in the image, is the ability to choose. And the ability to choose, most of us think of in terms of our intellectual ability to choose. But it's a kind of choice based in the depths of what it means to be a free creature in the presence of God. Freedom. To be free is not necessarily I can be free to do what I feel. Actually, that's there too. But it's that freedom to choose the good. That wherever we are, no matter how bad things are, no matter how wonderful things are, we will always have that ability at some place in the depths of our being to choose the good. From my perspective, as a practicing Christian, then that good is also to choose God.
We see in the New Testament, Christ says, "Why do you call me good? Only God is good." How do you differentiate good from the bad? Because sometimes they intertwine into each other. Sometimes people choose something and they justify that the results will justify their choice.
That's a really good question, because sometimes we can be fooling ourselves. And we all know what that's like. I don't think there's a person that's beyond the age of 5 or 6 perhaps that doesn't at times fool himself or herself. And so if we're fooling ourselves, we can say, oh yeah, God wants that, then sure, maybe, yes or no. But what's best is there's always a point in ourselves where we need to be radically, unconditionally, nakedly honest with ourselves in the presence of God, even as young as 5, maybe I'd say 6 or 7. And to, let's say, come clean in our relationship with our own selves in the presence of God, with choosing what is good. So even when things are confusing, even when things are bad, that the desire to please God pleases God. The desire to do the good, to follow through with the good in the depths of our being, even if we don't have all the answers, in itself is a seed that can draw us closer to God, and God works with that. And that sometimes helps me through a lot of tough situations, knowing, well, I'm not quite sure which door to choose, which way to go. But if I choose with the best I can peacefully discern, and as honestly as I know how in that moment, well, God reads my heart. God knows exactly what I'm dealing with. God knows exactly what I'm seeing and feeling, and He will work with that. I know that. You know, I've seen that unfold in my life, and the great thing for me is I've seen that unfold in the lives of many other people with whom I've gotten to know.
So the likeness that, as you said, is potential that we have to go to is ultimately the choice maker, if you let it be.
That's a good question. Is it more from the gift of likeness or image? You're really asking some deep theological questions, and so I'm enjoying the question. Whichever way it works, it's going to work. And so, but I think the desire of the heart, okay, I think that's what you're talking about. How our heart's desire, we were to be created in the image and likeness of God, is that our hearts have been molded, so to speak, to seek Him. And that all relationships in the end are theocentric, are aimed, are God-focused. And even our relationship as friends, we know each other for quite some time now, and brother and sister in the Lord, as we grow in friendship, in the love of friendship with each other and toward each other, that's also paradoxically or mysteriously God-centered too,
Yes.
which is kind of wonderful. And so being created in the image and likeness, which even though, since we as Christians believe, has been tainted or distorted somewhat with the fall of Adam and Eve, that gift has never gone away.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and because of Christ being who he is, being incarnate and saving us so that we may, so that bridge is rebuilt, in fact, even made stronger, because God now is, as we understand as Christians, one with us in a way that had never happened before. Christ as God becoming human, can look with hope in growing in deeper love with God and with one another and creation. And so is this more of the gift of growing in the likeness or of the image? In a way, they're so intertwined because it's God's gift, and I can't figure out all of God's gift. It doesn't matter. But it's a good question to ask, to sort of respect how wonderful this gift is. So, yes, our heart's desire is for God. And because of that, that sort of seeks us, gives us the courage, opens us up to reach to God, toward God. But it's God who does the work in leading us or filling us or in creating us in his likeness.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned about Christ being incarnate and giving us the salvation. That speaks to me about the importance of the restoration of the likeness or salvation of the human being, how important human being is. Even Christ found it so important, and he was incarnated for that purpose, to restore the image. So would you speak about the importance of the image of and likeness of God in human beings and in society? How do you think it is important, how important it is to speak about this to the people and let them know that there is
Well,
image?
the first thing that comes to mind is the scripture from the New Testament, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son for us. And so to restore that image and likeness, God became human. We're using big theological words, and I want to make sure that the audience understands what we're talking about, because I remember when I first came to seminary and they would talk about the incarnation, right? Even though I must have read it many times, and I think I understood it, but being in a context where everybody's talking about it, you start doubting your own reasoning because you're just overwhelmed. And so I would think incarnation, I thought they were talking about a brand of milk. It was carnation milk, it was dry milk, you know. No, it couldn't be, and then when I realized, no, it really is the fact of God mysteriously became human, an event that never happened before in the history of the universe, and we as Christians believe will not happen again. And so that was very affirming. That I did kind of know what that was, but the incarnation refers to the event of how Christians affirm the belief that God became a human person, dwelt among us, and somehow all of us have been changed as a result of that, knowingly or not. We're all connected to that. Christians or not, we're all somehow connected to that phenomenon. So that's why it makes it really important to talk about this, because we really are brothers and sisters from our creation originally, when God created the world. And in a sense, the incarnation is like even a new creation. Like we're even closer to one another. We don't even realize that, which is kind of a radical thing when you think about that.
And how does this topic relate to the modern society? What do you think about that?
Well, I think we live in a lonely society. It's a noisy, sometimes polluted, very distracting, very seductive, and lonely society. I'm not saying that this is not God's creation. And so while on the one hand I'm talking about how society is, I think, becoming progressively more and more lonely, and I think part of that is as we have more toys to play with, technological toys or the other kinds of toys that we have that can be good, the toys distract us from discerning more about who we really are in the presence of God. That hole in our soul that can only be filled by the loving God, who helps us become the person we've been created to be, which is, what's wonderful is we are all fully created in that image and likeness. At the same time, we are all called to be unique sons and daughters of God. So what does that mean? That means that both things are happening. That whatever it means, that potential of each of us to be one with God and one another is complete and full for all of us. And on the other hand, the me that's sitting here in the chair, or the you that's sitting in your chair, or everybody else sitting in their chairs, are unrepeatable. Mm-hmm. We are unrepeatable. And so both are true at the same time. But the key is, God is the one who created us, and so we will find out who we are, in a sense, as I tell my friends, and I didn't think I'd say this on TV, on a need-to-know basis. You know, as we grow, hopefully, mm-hmm. God tells us or turns us into who we're supposed to be. So tomorrow you and I can be very different, but that's all in God's plan, but we didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So we just show up, as long as we do the work of cultivating hearts that are pure and cultivating hearts that are, and minds that are striving to serve the goods and truth, which is the living God himself. And by doing that, we love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, and our neighbors as ourselves. That's all we have to do, which is everything. Mm-hmm. And so we live in a society that, and I think fallen human society has always sort of distracted us from that vocation, that calling. But I think today, with all of these wonderful inventions and toys that we can play with, they also become distractions away from the wrestling and the work that it takes to cultivate this kind of life.
It's very interesting. Now, once we spoke about the society, and you directly working with the society as a psychologist, how do you feel when you are in contact with a patient and being a psychologist, but in the meantime being a theologian? How do you connect these two things while working with the patient, looking at him or herself as an image of God? Does it help to help the person?
Well, you're going to think I'm crazy, okay? But I found that after all these years of doing this work, that when people come in to talk to me, be they a friend, be they a client or a patient or a student, that when I have in my best and healthy self, I look for Christ in them. Mm-hmm. I see God in them. And so they may be Christian, they may not be Christian. Because if people who come to see me, especially in my office as a psychologist, are coming because they want to live more truthfully. There's something they want to look at, they want to sit with, they want to reflect on, they want to get healing from, that is blocking their way, or they want to expand. Sometimes they're coming in to expand something good that's already happened. They are discerning what is good in their life. They are pursuing the good. And for me, when it's done in that kind of a sincere manner, they're taking this time, they are humbling themselves to talk about their depths with me, a stranger, and striving to do something good that's beyond them. Well, in my understanding, they're seeking God. They are the living God, and I may not put my words of spirituality and theology on them, because that's not polite. I keep mine to myself. But I'm excited because this is how I see what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I marvel at the miracles in people's lives that I've come to see on my side of the chair, for example, with what people do when they quietly and humbly struggle with what they need to be doing for themselves that's good, capital G, in their lives.
Mm.
And that's true, capital T, in their lives. If for me the good and the truth is a person, a divine person, that's for me an extra joy.
The troubles, the problems that humans have in their lives, in their daily life, in their relationship with each other, with their own selves, with God, is that they lose the connection with God and they don't realize about the image.
I think so. That's a good point. They lose the connection, but we're all kind of short of becoming saints in the fullest and deepest sense of the word. We're all short of that, and so we're all striving and struggling to some degree. I think what's happening is because of the distractions of this world and this life, and some of them are good. I'm not saying to throw out the good, but even the good, when it's out of balance, when good things, good toys are out of balance, I love to eat. Mm. But, I struggle with eating in a way that's balanced and healthy because as much as food is good and as much as nutrition is important, sometimes can be off balance. And so having a healthier relationship with food often means having a healthy relationship with many other things at the same time. We all have an inner hunger that will not be satisfied unless it rests in God. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we live in a situation that doesn't tell us, oh, you're feeling a hunger that's good. Oftentimes we get to that hunger or that emptiness. It doesn't feel good. We're not comfortable. Mm-hmm. And we want to fill it with something so we don't have to feel it. That's really understandable and in some ways almost commendable that you're trying to address it. But what happens is when we keep addressing this hunger that is beyond just what these toys that we've been given or gifts we've been given to fill can get us into trouble. We can become misguided by replacing something else to fill that void, rather than seeking a truthful relationship with God, seeking a truthful relationship with the truth who's madly in love with each one of us. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so sometimes growing in the image and likeness of God means we're going to feel uncomfortable. We're going to feel confused. We're going to feel kind of even tired and sad sometimes because, we're the things that we thought were going to fill it aren't going to fill it. So we're going to be sad. That's not a bad sadness. It's a healthy sadness, but it's still tiring. It's still, but it's temporary. The temporary might mean a while, but it's temporary. So that we can rest in that place and be more alive and peaceful in that place of respecting where we are called to be quiet in our depths, attending to the things of God. Mm-hmm. And then we reach out in our daily lives.
Last time I had a show, the topic was on family. Mm-hmm. Now I would like to use the chance and get a professional opinion about relationship in the family, because we know that the modern society is suffering from divorces and many other sad facts. What do you think would be helpful for marriage life in terms of realizing about image of God being present in them? Because when they get divorced, my understanding is that they don't like each other. Mm-hmm. And if you don't like the person, it means that you reject everything in that person. But if there is image of God, does that mean that we reject God when we don't like somebody? And is there reconciliation out of it or way out of it, realizing that that person is made in image of God? Maybe there are some mistakes that he or she has, but that's not a reason to reject the person completely.
Let me start with, which is strange, Arkady, divorce. Mm-hmm. Because according to the statistics, at least 50% of American marriages are going to wind up in divorce. And there's some who say the statistics are being sort of read in a conservative way. It might even be, as you notice my anger, and I'm getting angry, it might be even 60% of marriages.
Like John the Baptist.
Well,
it's not really anger, that's what my
that's
point
right.
was.
It's righteous indignation, but
Yes.
it is a kind of anger, but hopefully a humble one that's not out to hurt others, but just,
Yes.
incredulous. And I want to speak a little bit to divorce, people who have already divorced. I think it's important, divorce happens for lots and lots and lots of reasons. And I think you have a point. Sometimes I think two things. If the husband and wife do not become friends, and that friendship has to be cultivated through the years, and it takes more work, in my opinion, not less work as time goes on, to cultivate the friendship between the husband and the wife because of how life is. And so that's the first job, that all of that is important. And even more importantly is that their spiritual relationship with God and each other. So it's like a three-ring circus. So there's the husband and the wife, each has their relationship with God, and then the husband and wife as a couple have a relationship with God. So it's like a three-ring circus. But I want to come back to marriage in a minute or two once I talk about divorce. Because when divorce happens, it usually means, well, the husband and wife are no longer friends. Or maybe one is the friend and the second one isn't. Many times, when people look at their relationships 5, 10, 15 years later, they may say, well, I'm now ready to see that I had about 50% or someplace between 40 and 60% of the responsibility for the relationship not to work. And so most of the time, let's say one or both members of the relationship have 40 to 60% of the fault for why the relationship didn't work. There are situations where sometimes one person is more at fault, as far as I'm concerned, than the other, in the sense that one person came in with a different set of expectations, and the second person didn't meet up to that, and divorce happens that way. And so if it's the 40 to 60%, or the 80-20%, or 90-10%, I think what happens is when as we survive the aftermath of the divorce, that the survivors of the divorce need to peacefully, in the presence of God, keep growing in peace around it. So what does that mean? Oftentimes it means finding a way to forgive oneself with God's help, and also to forgive their spouse or their former spouse. That, in some situations, is easy to do, or relatively easy to do, might take time. In other situations, where there's been gross abuse or neglect or abandonment, it's very, very hard to do. The good news is we don't have to do it all at once. We can put it in God's hand, and we can just do the tiny bit we can do, and whatever that is, that's it. And God will help us go to the next tiny piece, be it a piece of dust, to have that sense of forgiveness and peace grow. So I'm not someone who tries to shove forgiveness down a person's throat when they're not ready and when they still have much to work through. But the issue of forgiveness, the issue of growing in peace, is a gift that works on many dimensions, including towards our own selves. The more we try to discern how we may have contributed, or if we've done that work, how to assess peacefully what the other person has done, and to release that person with goodwill at some point. At some point. Why do I say that? Because the more we do that, even if it's not perfect, which is great, we don't have to be perfect. Again, God reads our hearts. The more we do that, the more we give the opportunity for God to work in our lives so that more good can happen, more new life, more new directions can happen. I hope I'm making sense, but it's really important that this is a long-term process, and as people move on and want to start again, the more this is healed, the more this is cleaned up, the more room there is for authentic growth of the person to become who they're really called to be, and that's God's mind and heart. I don't know what that is. And also for new starts. I see so much of it, and I see so much of that pain. I just wanted to start with that.
Well, when I raised the question, there was the same pain that I see. Either people don't have the bravery to get married, or if they somehow do it, they get divorced in a short period of time. When you mentioned about the percentage of the fault, let's say somebody, in some case, it's 99 and 1. 99% of this person's fault and 1% this person's fault. And obviously this 1% person cannot do anything. Just as you said, it's a high percentage of neglect or abuse or whatever, then it's better to be divorced. I remember now I was listening to one Oriental philosopher, and they asked him, what do you think about the marriages? He said everybody should get divorced. And it was very critical. I felt very bad. And then he started explaining. He said, well, the families we have now, it's better not to have something like that because of the quality. But if they can be good, then that's the best thing to be. So now in this situation, when we have this bad environment where the children may be suffering and stuff, my ultimate question is, where is that image in that person who has 99% fault? How can he find it? I mean, does he still have that image of God that this other party can hope about?
Everybody has it. Everybody has it. And so if we pile dirt and layers of dirt and layers of dirt over that, so it's harder to have access to, harder to feel that hunger and thirst for God, for the truth, for the good. That's in a sense a tragedy. It's a catastrophe, actually. But the image doesn't go away. We just keep piling layer upon layer of mud and dirt and clay, but the value of who we are, creating the image and likeness of God, is still there. And there are many people, I believe, and I have met some, who would put themselves in that category being, I was the person at 99% fault.
Yes.
My poor spouse. All they did was showed up, and I basically came in with one set of assumptions and side-widened them with my expectations. You know, once we were out of the church building or wherever the marriage took place. But they would say, these people that I have met that would say I was 99% at fault, they would say something had to break in me. Something had to break. And that varies with the stories of each person.
Yes, and here maybe this again sounds a little bit theological, but when you were saying that this person said it was my fault, I remember I had the picture of Christ on a cross and thieves on two sides, and one of them says that he is son of the God and he gets full forgiveness, and Christ says, you will be with me. Do you think that when the person says, oh my gosh, it was my fault, I was 99% at fault, do you think that's where it starts to taking off that dirt?
Absolutely.
And
that absolutely.
And you think that person would be now ready to be fully responsible for the...
No.
No?
No. No. Are babies fully responsible? You know, no. Once it's like a rebirth. When someone has that kind of awareness, the gift of, oh my gosh, my life is a tragedy. What have I done? That's in a sense the beginning of a second chance. And yes, sometimes a person feels even worse when they wake up to that realization, but it's also a blessing. If they're being sustained in an environment that will help support him or her through that change. Yeah. Because we need God and we need others who are loving persons acting in ways God would want us to act to support him or her through that change.
And now, you mentioned earlier that this society...
I want to come back to marriage too, but so go ahead.
Yes.
So don't forget.
Okay. You said that this society is a very lonely society.
Right.
Now, when we have a person like this, a baby, who
Right.
needs loving care and God,
Right.
God is obviously there, even though we know or not.
Right.
He's always there for sinners and for righteous people. But what about the loving people? If we are living in a lonely society, this baby is in danger.
That's why I'm getting the chills as you say that. That's why it's very important that all of us who are listening to this, and however you agree or not agree, whatever is good that you agree with, take it and develop that. Because there are starving people everywhere, and it's just not starving on a physical level, although that's happening too. But there are spiritually and psychologically starving people everywhere. And so by saying good morning to someone you wouldn't be normally saying good morning to, by taking 5 minutes out of your way and treating the other person with respect and concern and interest, so that to the point where not just, oh, let me be, it's kind of like it's hypocritical. Now, let me go talk to someone for 5 minutes and that'll make me a better person. If I go in like that, I might get some kind of benefit for it because I am going out of my way. But if I go out of my way for 5 minutes and say, okay, God, I may be changed for the rest of my life, or at least the rest of the day, by what might happen with the exchange with this person with whom I'll be speaking, I think that's far more potentially powerful for whatever happens in those 5 minutes when I meet this other person, when this other person meets me, and for my relationship with God from that point on.
Yes.
So it's not just taking 5 minutes to speak with someone, it's taking 5 minutes to speak with someone and risk being changed forever.
Yeah.
And that's a gift, a responsibility, a challenge, and a cross.
Yes. Now, if you would, the marriage, did you have any specific?
Well,
something?
the reason why I wanted to get back to marriage is because when marriage is working relatively well, that's the job of the husband and wife, to help one another, support one another in their walk with their own lives, be it within the family or outside the family, it's within their own lives, and in their walk, practically speaking, with their relationships with everyone they know, in the presence of God and their relationship with God. We don't do anything outside the presence of God. Everything is in the presence of God. The more we are aware of this, the more we acknowledge this, the more we rest in this with serenity, I think the more real, more authentic, more life-giving our exchanges can become.
I have one question. It may be a little bit in a different realm, but when we read the lives of the saints, and as I go through the list of the books that you have been editing or writing, I come to know that you probably read a lot of the lives of the saints. I see that the higher they go for us as a saint, the more they feel like they are sinners, they more find out about themselves, and sometimes they lament.
In the modern thinking, in the contemporary life, when people who might be aware of this, what is this? They're becoming better people, and they're saying more self-deprecating things. In fact, some of my students at the seminary, we've had discussions on this, and so there's two ways of looking at that, which are both true. When someone has been put down, when someone has been treated like they have no value, that they are invisible. Invisibility is one of the most catastrophic experiences on the human soul. So if someone says to us, I didn't hurt you, but in a sense what they were doing were abandoning us or neglecting us and treating us as if we were nothing or invisible, that's a form of abuse. Okay, and so invisibility is experienced by the soul as catastrophic. Some people would rather not exist than feel that shaming. It's a kind of deep shame that we can't bear. And so invisibility is so catastrophic that it's important to restore someone to a sense of dignity, to restore someone to a sense of what it means to be a dignified human being. All right. When Jesus would heal people, when Jesus would stop the stoning of the sinful woman, she knew what she was doing. There's many interpretations there, but she was caught in doing something inappropriate and not good for her or anybody else. But he also knew the circumstances of her life, that she was treating herself like garbage the way she was treated like garbage all of her life. And so the first thing he did was he restored her dignity. Mm-hmm. And he did it after he shooed away all the people who were trying to attack her, mm-hmm. To the point where they had a conversation. She called him Lord. He treated her with dignity. And she left with dignity and in his love. And he just said, sin no more. And so there comes a place in that where throwing rocks at ourselves, self-deprecating, is not healthy. Okay. All right, so that's claiming that dignity. Once someone, I believe, and what I think Christianity teaches, has more or less a fairly stable sense of that sense of dignity, and we grow more in the Lord, what happens is that as we grow more in the Lord, there are cobwebs in our hearts and souls. Mm-hmm. There are places we might be stuck. There are places of self-possession. You know, I'm just so wonderful. You know, the vanity, conceit, hard-heartedness, that as we grow, it's as if the more we grow in the light, the more the light also sort of illuminates the cobwebs that need to be dealt with. Mm-hmm. And so when you read in the annals of Christianity, holy people talking about their sins and how they are not worthy of the love of God. It's not that they don't have the dignity. In a sense, they have that, but they've advanced in their walk in the Lord to such a degree that they want more of God, and they just want to be more in His love, to be in that love and to share with others as well. And they're noticing all of the cobwebs and all of the dust and hardened places that still need to be healed.
I want to give an understanding of growing into the likeness, the potential likeness of God. When we start, how do we start it? Our way towards the likeness, and what kind of dangers can be. Because now I remember there is a saying that says, the higher you go, the more dangerous it gets if you fail. And for our audience, let's say they are listening and they want to start finding that likeness. Mm-hmm. They want to have that tier of...
Well, they don't have to find it, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't run away. Don't go looking down the image and likeness store. It's inside you. You know, it's there. It's there. Nobody can take that away from you. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we need time to sit with it. And maybe some of us have been running away from that for one reason or other. And so just even to admit that, to ask God for help, that we can never escape the mercy of God's love. And so that you asked that question, there's something I'd like to read, and about not being able to have to be anxious about finding God's love. That we may not, just because we don't feel it all the time, because of our distractions, because of our worries, because of how life may be hitting us at a particular time. That doesn't mean that we are not nestled, each of us, in the center of the palm of the merciful and loving God. God is a merciful God, mm-hmm. All right, and wants us to return to Him. There is a beautiful quote, if I can share, from the 4th mm-hmm. century by a bishop. His name is Gregory of Nyssa, Saint Gregory of Nyssa, and he says, "For this is the safest way to protect the good things you enjoy." Mm-hmm. These are the spiritually good things. "Realize how much your Creator has honored you above all other creatures. He did not make the heavens in His image, nor the moon, the sun, the beauty of the stars, or anything else which surpasses understanding. You alone are a reflection of eternal beauty, a receptacle of happiness, an image of the true life. And if you look to him, you will become what he is, imitating him who shines within you, whose glory is reflected in your purity. Nothing in the entire creation can equal your grandeur. All the heavens can fit into the palm of the hand of God. Although he is so great that he can hold all creation in his palm, you can wholly embrace him. He dwells within you.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, and it completes my the answer to my question. We don't need to go far. We need to go deeper inside of us, and that's probably the tragedy of the human being that looks outside of himself in other people to find the goodness instead of looking inside and digging the dirt out.
It's both God within us, God between us, God among us.
Okay.
Okay, but I understand what you're meaning, that to make another person my God, to chase other people's opinions as if they were God, that can be very dangerous. But to trust that God abides within us, that is just an astounding thing. And among us and between us, that's even more astounding. And to rest and to trust in that as we stumble along with our choices that we have to make in our everyday lives makes an enormous difference, I believe.
When we look at the Roman emperors, they imagined themselves as gods. I see this as an everyday danger. When we think about ourselves, that we have that God's image in ourselves, and even though the Creator, as the quote was saying, can hold the entire creation in the palm of his hand, is within us, can it become a reason to...
Oh, I think I know where you're going. Can we appreciate...
Can we imagine ourselves like the Roman emperor?
Absolutely. We can all be a whole millions of Roman emperors running around being just in love with our own creation and cutting ourselves off from authentic love, meaning loving ourselves in God's presence, loving one another in the presence of God, and loving God more. We miss out. We can all become emperors and empresses, and at the same time miss out.
Our time is getting close to be over. From the depth of your heart to our audience, what would you wish them to do, to start with, or to find as a help on their way?
Well, I would first ask their forgiveness if I said anything that offended anyone by mistake, or made people feel uncomfortable in a way that is a distraction to them. What I wish for people is their becoming peaceful and more relaxed, that the author of creation abides within them, and that as well as all about them, and that we are accountable to him for the conduct of our lives. And so, because thankfully God reads our hearts and our thoughts, we don't have to get neurotic about making sure, does God understand? Of course God understands. And so to peacefully make changes that are more in line with serving him, with making room for him in our lives, with treating others with love in a way that makes it easier for us to love God and one another, is a good way to start.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate that you shared this important time with us and with our audience, and I'm sure that everybody enjoyed it, and many people will find cure and healing in the words that you shared with us. Thank you very much, and we hope that we can have more discussions like this on various topics, because if we keep talking, it will go endlessly. I have so many questions, But thank you again, and dear audience, we will see you next time, and have a good day.